Hello, everyone. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat. Looks like I got Lucy Bean here. Um, Welcome into the weekly AMA. Try to do it every Monday, 7:30 Mountain Standard Time. If you guys want to put it on your schedule, a lot to cover, a lot of news. One of the things I saw this week that I thought was interesting, thought you guys might want to watch as well, was Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart sat down with the secretary of or the deputy secretary of defense, and he asked her some pointed questions, and she didn't have very good answers. But as I've said many times, these trends are going to continue. The lack of recruiting in the military, especially as things heat up around the world, is going to continue because they can't pay people. They can't, right? I mean, they can if they don't give Raytheon $400 billion. But where do you think the politicians' priorities are? With the rank and file or with Raytheon? Maybe eventually the priorities will change, but in reality, what I keep telling people is your pension and your pay in the military is 100% reliant on politicians being honest and doing correct math. So as more people start to realize that, maybe not even realize that fact, but they realize that they're not getting paid and it's not keeping up with inflation, and all these pay raises are actually pay cuts because inflation's 9 and they get a 4% pay raise. Whoopie ding. So I'll play this video and then I'll get into your questions if you guys have any. Let's take a look here. This is Jon Stewart from this week talking to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, which see how she answers.
Are unfair questions of somebody within a department of that size and scope. Do you feel that it's somewhat unfair?
You have a particular thing you really want to talk about and you're asking me other questions, but I don't think it's unfair to ask me about the audit. It's absolutely the case that the United States military should be able to pass an audit, and we've got to be on that pathway to get there.
But don't you think that does speak to the larger point that we're trying to get at, which is good journalism uncovers corruption? And
okay, I mean, good journalism does uncover corruption, but I'm not sure these two things are linked. An audit is not.
But they are.
Okay, so you need to explain to me, do you understand what an audit does and the degree to which it is linked to the question that you're asking?
I believe so.
Okay, go ahead. Give me your explanation.
No, I don't mind learning. So what I would suggest is that the audit that they have in the military doesn't really look at whether or not there's efficacy. It's just whether they got delivered the thing that they ordered. And
that is any audit. That is any audit. That is true.
But generally, those audits aren't $400 billion for Raytheon and $1.7 trillion for a plane that doesn't seem to be doing. Like, there is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse within a system.
Audits and waste, fraud, and abuse are not the same thing. So let's decompose these pieces.
Please educate me on
sure. So an audit is exactly what you just described, which is, do I know what was delivered to which place?
Right.
The ability to pass an audit, or the fact that the DoD has not passed an audit, is not suggestive of waste, fraud, and abuse. That is completely false right there. So
what is
now it's a question of, it's suggestive that we don't have an accurate inventory that we can pull up of what we have where. That is not the same as saying we can't do that because waste, fraud, and abuse has occurred.
So in my world, that's waste.
How is that waste?
If I give you $1 billion and you can't tell me what happened to it, that to me is wasteful. That means you are not responsible. But if you can't tell me where it went, then what am I supposed to think? And when there has been reporting, I mean, this is not, look, I'm not saying this is on you and that you caused this, but I think it's a tough argument to make
sure
that
I didn't cause it.
an $850 billion budget to an organization that can't pass an audit and tell you where that money went. Like, I think most people would consider that somewhere in the realm of waste, fraud, or abuse, because they would wonder why that money isn't well accounted for. And especially when they see food insecurity on military bases and they
You want
see,
to talk about that? Because that's a good, we should be talking. I mean,
Well,
I'm
it's
trying to
all-
understand
is-
where you're trying to go, other than the dollars, which really
it's-
bother you.
I think it doesn't really bother me. I think it's all connected.
Okay.
I think
Tell
when
me,
I
tell
look,
me that story. Tell me how you're thinking
well,
about that.
when I see a State Department get a certain amount of money and a military budget be 10 times that, and I see a struggle within government to get people like more basic services, and then that department that got that, I mean, we got out of 20 years of war and the Pentagon got a $50 billion raise. Like, that's shocking to me. Now, I may not understand exactly the ins and outs and the incredible magic of an audit, but I'm a human being who lives on the earth and can't figure out how $850 billion to a department means that the rank and file still have to be on food stamps. Like, to me, that's fucking corruption. I'm sorry. And if that blows your mind,
Totally fine.
and if you think like that's like a crazy agenda for me to have, I really think that that's institutional thinking, and that it's not looking at the day-to-day reality of the people that you call the greatest fighting force in the world. So I get back to this idea of like, I'm not looking to pick a fight with you, but I am surprised at that the reaction to these questions are, you don't know what an audit is, bucko. Like, that's just weird to me.
Okay. On food insecurity, major priority for us. A lot of funds are going toward that. The biggest issues we have found, first of all,
Lower
we
than
have
inflation, by the way.
significantly increased funding on food insecurity. And we do think we are getting much better on that. We believe some of the challenges we face are not what you often think of as, food insecurity as hunger. They're really around, do we have food available? For instance, as people come on and off shifts, is it healthy food? Those are the types of food insecurity issues we are seeing in and around our military installations. We have increased pay 2 times in a row here. We've done 4.6% pay raise last year. We've asked for a 5.2% pay raise this year. We've also increased basic allowances and increased housing and pay and other allowances. So overall, we definitely think we need to increase the spending that we are putting forward toward our service members and their families. We're putting our money where our mouth is. Another big area is childcare. Spending a lot more money on childcare. That includes both childcare facilities, and it includes benefit that allows folks to go out on the economy to get childcare and have that subsidized by the government. Those are all examples of ways we're trying to put money forward for our service members and their families.
Once you meet with a TurboTax
All right,
expert
so-
who will do your taxes for you,
Sorry, hold on one second. The sanctimonious nature of this woman. I tell people, I mean, people in the military are used to this, but this is just a sign, in my opinion, of things to come. Because in the military, probably I think the DoD is the biggest employer in the United States. And really what they can't tell you, and what I keep repeating to people, especially people in the military, is they can't pay you more. They can't. Even though we got a $50 billion pay raise after we pulled out of the United States' longest war, can't pay you more, because where did their loyalties lie? It's with Raytheon, it's with their buddies, because these 4-star generals, when they get out of the military, they have these sweet contracts. And they have buddies who work at Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, and they have friends in the force, which, technically it's illegal, but there's workarounds. And this is all throughout government. What I keep repeating to people is, if we're waiting for a savior, like somebody to come in and say, hey guys, here's the math, no, we won't vote for it. I would, right? But you would probably. But the American people will not vote for it. Because if I come in and I say, hey, look, there's been some nefarious stuff going on in the past, so I need to keep your taxes high, but cut 50 to 75% of your benefits in the military, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, probably not going to get voted in. And so the reality is, politicians are going to do what's in their best interest, and that is to get reelected and keep power. How do they do that? By keep promising things. And what is the result of them keeping these promises, or trying to keep these promises? Inflation, therefore social unrest. So it's quite interesting. That is the Deputy Secretary of Defense. You saw, like, as soon as Jon Stewart went off script, like, and asked her pointed questions, she kind of got defensive. And the truth is, when she talks about pay raises, they're actually pay cuts, because last year the Department of Defense got a 4-point-something% pay raise when inflation was 9%. And that was advertised inflation, CPI inflation. But if you went back to 1970 and did inflation the same way they used to calculate back then, it was closer to 16% inflation. So these pay cuts start to add up, right? And then not to mention, in the military, housing is a big issue because you're forced to move. A lot of people wouldn't choose to move during this crazy housing crisis. You don't get that choice in the military. All right, let's take a look, see if you guys have any questions. You see, I got 7 of you here. Lucy Beans here. Is it Ladex? Ladex? Thank you for hosting. No problem. Thanks for tuning in. Yes, I agree. She is quite defensive. And if you study history, you know that this is why these people get into power, because they say the right things. Because if you had an honest person, like an honest economist, who came in and said, "Hey guys, this doesn't look good," do you think they're going to get the job? If you had an honest 4-star who really cared about supporting and defending the Constitution, you think they're going to get the job? Probably not. Yeah. What a condescending. Yes, I agree. First rule they teach you in MBA school is, if you can't count it, you can't manage it. And I kind of understand, the military being such a behemoth. There's money going all over the place, but that's our job. Keep in mind, September 10th, 2001, was it Donald Rumsfeld who was talking about auditing the military, and there was $2 trillion missing? Yeah. Military hasn't passed an audit, I don't think, ever. I assume much of the DoD and Pentagon are not transparent. Yes, there's black budgets, there's all that stuff on their funding due to military secrecy, to some extent, but a lot of things are covered under this classified. That's convenient, isn't it? My wife asked me where I was last night, and I told her it was classified. So you got this convenient kind of classification thing. But to be honest, I think a lot of that is weaponized to make people money. That being said, funding would be nice if transparent, but for the public during this economic situation we are currently in. But keep in mind, DoD funding, I believe our interest alone this year is going to be more than the most powerful military in the world. That should scare people, right? The most powerful military in the world ever, $850 billion. We're probably going to pay close to, depending on what we refinance the debt at, $1 trillion in interest only. No one knows. No one knows this is coming. Ask your average neighbor, ask your family. They think you're taking crazy pills. You talk about, hey, hyperinflation, there's going to be a lot of pain in the 2020s. You better prepare, buy this, that, this. Taking crazy pills. You're a conspiracy theorist. That's why I like to focus on the math, because you can't deny the math, right? Who is this lady? She is the Deputy Secretary of Defense. So Lloyd Austin's Deputy SecDef. If she was my boss, I'd quit. I'll tell you, the reason you don't hear a lot about this in military circles, you don't hear like a lot of military people like, hey, this is some BS. I'm not doing that. Yeah, that is not how the military works. The culture of the military is to follow orders. So the way they kind of resist You say hi?
I want you to.
Can you go
I
upstairs?
want you to.
That's my daughter.
I'm in here because I want. I was wondering if you've seen Monty.
Yes, he's upstairs.
Where?
He's up in his room. Hashtag dad life trying to do live while the kids are awake. Yes, if she was my boss, but the military, like I said, there's this culture of like, okay, hey, you can't degrade higher ups and the president and all that kind of stuff. I get that. But the way the military resists is they get out. Retention falls off a cliff. No one wants to join. What do you think's happening? Exactly that. What sort of pay increase does the military need to get even with inflation? That's a tough question, seeing as how inflation is different for everybody, but I'd say probably 20% when it comes to groceries and housing, etc. But that's not going to happen. We had a 20% pay raise under Reagan, but I don't think it's going to happen. Which military gets, I would say, if you're smart with money, you're not in the poverty lane, but it's definitely not a job you have to get rich. But at the very least, you should be able to afford food and housing since they force you to move, etc. Because there's a lot of things that happen that you're required to just leave your family. And if they're struggling, you can't have a second job in the military. It's nearly impossible. So there's no such thing as work harder and make more money. It's not how the military works. So people choose to get out. Pentagon and CIA are unconstitutional organizations that have no accountability whatsoever. You know, it's interesting. The military obviously has been around since 1776. Military as a whole, my career, I've been in for 15 years. I've had very positive, freedom-loving patriots who I've worked with. That's the majority of the military in my experience. Once you get into higher ranks, it becomes more political. So the rank and file, they typically get out when, I like to ask a lot of people, are you more or less patriotic after serving in the military? And it's a mixed bag. It's definitely a mixed bag in the last 2 years. So people join the military to support and defend the Constitution, which is the oath they swear. And when it feels like you're working in an HR department at Apple, that's not why they joined. So they leave. They can make more money on the outside. As I've said before, they join for patriotic reasons or for monetary reasons. They don't have another job. They want to get a college degree, whatever. And there's more jobs offering college degrees. You work at Starbucks, you get free college. And patriotic reasons, there's a lot of people that aren't joining for that reason either. Yeah, my kids, I got 3 of them. And usually they're pretty good. I'm like, hey, okay, daddy's going to do a live stream downstairs. It's around their bedtime, so they're going to bed. But my daughter, she's a wild one. I'm going to have to keep a close eye on her when she's a teenager. She's very funny. What am I going to do when I get out of the service? Great question. So I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm finishing up my degree. I think it's kind of a waste of time, but it's free. And I'd like to continue this YouTube thing. It's kind of a side hobby, but I'd like to open up. My wife gets a vote, but my dream is have like a ranch in Wyoming and have a couple Airbnbs on it to make money, but also to use it as like a veteran facility for like not only battered women's shelter, but veterans and stuff. So use it a couple times a year as a nonprofit for like a veterans mental health, etc. We'll see. I've got a lot of plans, but I know what I don't want to do, and that's in any capacity work in an office or for the government ever again. So it just slowly it's bureaucratic. It's just kind of the nature of working in the military. So I've Got about 4.5 years left. What's up, all-nighter hider? In Arizona, head back to California. What's the weather like out there? We finally got 70s in Colorado, so it's kind of nice. Safe driving. Yes. So one other story I wanted to show you guys that I thought was kind of interesting. Did you guys hear about the Pentagon leaks? So there's some top secret documents, which you can look at this two different ways. This was intentional, and they're pretending it was leaked, and these aren't actually true, or these are actual top secret documents that somebody took pictures of, and they're leaking all over the internet. Not good. Not good. So the Pentagon, I shared a story this morning. It's like geopolitics, like what is happening? There's all these countries, including our allies like France, who are like, hey, you know what? Those people are kind of insane over there. I don't really want to be aligned with insanity anymore. So I'm going to look to the Chinese Communist Party. That's crazy. Okay, so it says here, Pentagon shares Easter Sunday update on classified documents leaks. And there's like hundreds of documents. Hundreds. Pentagon Deputy Secretary Sabrina Singh, that's the guy you heard talking earlier, so the DoD is assessing the validity of the photographed documents that are circulating on social media sites and that appear to contain sensitive and highly classified material. Military analysts cautioned that at least some of the images of the documents have been doctored. That means it's probably true. According to the New York Times, for instance, they suspect estimates about the war dead on both sides, because it says it's talking about Ukraine, and it was like 330,000 Ukrainians have died in the war. Which I've been saying, it's a war of attrition. Unless there's boots on the ground, NATO boots on the ground, Ukraine's going to lose. Because you can't keep producing soldiers, right? That's an insane amount of loss. News outlet also noted that it indicated the United States knows more about the Russian military campaign than Ukraine's defense plan, which it has spent around $200 billion to assist. On Sunday, there was also Israeli documents that were like the United States documents, but about Israel. Israel pushed back on the alleged intelligence that said the country's Mossad intelligence agency encouraged protests against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. That means it's probably true. So as the world falls apart and they're looking for stability, which is to me, it is so crazy to look at history and watch it repeat, because politicians and central planners, people that don't have a moral compass other than I want more power and control, as things fall apart, which they will continue to fall apart. That's what happens when you meet them like very professional. It will continue to fall apart because we cannot continue to spend and not have inflation. So there's going to be more and more people, and you've seen it the last 2 years. There's a ton of people that are questioning everything, questioning the medical field, questioning their politicians, questioning the media, people that are just normies that have seen very obvious lies from their politicians, and they're questioning everything. But the only thing politicians can do in that circumstance is either be honest or try to seize more power and control, because they're going to see that people get pissed. People don't like it. They may not know why. May not know why there's inflation, but they don't like it. And so when they realize not only, in the 1950s, you could support a family with one job and no college degree. Now you have to have two people working to support a family. And then you can't even afford that. You can't even afford to have kids with both the mom and dad working. People start to do the math, at least the social math, not necessarily the real math, which is, hey, we have $32 trillion in debt that we kind of voted for. Because we said, okay, hey, everything's fine. I guess we'll stay home and you'll give us checks and life will be great. I guess you can bail out the banks. Doesn't work. All right. Wyoming is a great state to start an LLC. Come to Montana. Montana's another one, but isn't there a ton of Californians there? Like Bozeman, I heard, had a ton of people move there over the last 2 years. I don't need to be out in the middle of nowhere. My wife likes some creature comforts, but an acre or two would be nice. People that are 2A friendly. Wyoming's very crypto friendly. They even, I think, have tried to do some kind of legislation with gold within the state. So, and then school choice is another thing that I'm big on. All right, let me know if you guys have any more questions before I wrap up here. Yeah. Leaking is not, how do I put this? Do you think Edward Snowden did the right thing? And so Julian Assange, same thing. A lot of people are, look at the way Xi Jinping treats the media. Look at the way Vladimir Putin does. And I asked him, do you know anything about Edward Snowden? Do you know anything about these whistleblowers who were promised protection and they whistleblow and then they get the hammer, right? It's not good. So yeah, I think if the Pentagon's doing something illegal, how do you fight against that if it's classified? That's a tough question to answer. Yeah. Bozeman and Hamilton have blown up. Have I don't know where you live. What is it? The Flathead Valley. That's really nice. I used to be out in Spokane, so I drive through Spokane, Washington. So I drive through Montana a lot. Love to be close to skiing, the outdoors, all that stuff. So we'll see. I probably won't stay in Colorado. I love Colorado, but I don't love the politics. So, and unfortunately, that statement alone, it used to be, hey, it's a little left or whatever. But now it's like they invade every facet of your life. It is not like, I don't like the politics, so what? We think different. It's, I'm going to invade every facet of your life, from schools, the type of food you eat. Do you have to pay for a plastic bag now when you go to the grocery store? It's just kind of ridiculous. Too bad Terra Plant in Wyoming isn't publicly traded, or plans to be. Colstrip in Montana is potentially building a nuclear plant as well. Yeah, they're not dumb in Wyoming and Montana. They understand where energy comes from, which is another kind of ism for me. As the world tries to de-dollarize, what really matters, and France showed us this, what really matters at the end of the day, they can posture, they can do all this stuff. They don't have energy. They are screwed. So they are literally virtue signaling by saying, you know what, we're not going to buy Russian oil. We don't want to fund their war. So what we're going to do is have Russia send it to China. China's going to upcharge us and send it to us. That is the world we live in today. And then there's actually people who have a brain who go, hey, they see the writing on the wall. We need to be energy independent. And there's states doing it too. Hydroelectric, etc. But these green energy people, if you had a conversation with them, you probably would agree on a lot of things. You don't want whatever they think about the global warming or whatnot. Most people don't want to ruin the globe, right? But you know what ruins the globe more than anything else? Nuclear war and war in general. It ain't good. There's not a lot of green stuff happening in Ukraine right now. So what causes war is resource control, right? If people can't heat their home, that's a huge problem. And that gets people riled up more than anything. All right, guys, any more questions before I close it out? Looks like I still got about 7 of you here. One last thing I wanted to say, unless there's any more questions. I saw you, Lucy Bean. I think, I'd love to know what you guys think, but I think the trend, I've talked about all the nuance of hyperinflation. Will it happen? All this de-dollarization. I think it's going to take decades, but I don't think it's going to be trending like, oh, we're living good. Oh no, we're not. It's going to be a constant decline in the standard of living for Americans, which the huge problem that politicians don't want is social unrest. So it's people realizing, as I've said many, many times, why we haven't voted this out, why we haven't had a problem with it in the future, bailing out the banks, etc., is life kept going. We didn't have inflation. Life was normal. Same thing with the last 2 years. And then, inflation. And so that is the thing that is worrying politicians more than anything, because they keep spending right now. Big time. If it doesn't cause inflation, that's how we got to 32 trillion. But the one thing that they cannot control is inflation. And they're not going to be able to control that because it has to do with supply. The only reason we've gotten supply is free, easy, cheap money, right? So the consequences of austerity are worse, way worse than inflation. The Great Depression 2.0 is going to be way worse. So I think we're going to have a combination of the two. We're going to have Great Depression. They're going to come in with more liquidity. And the only reason that the system can't continue without more liquidity, meaning more dollars in the system, because that 32 trillion is just the tip of the iceberg, because all the business debt, all the personal debt, all the credit card debt, people can't survive. So that's why the stock market is still not like destroyed, because they're calling the Fed's bluff. They're like, hey, you can't do this. We know you're going to pump more liquidity in, and there's going to be more inflation. So we're calling it by not letting the stock market really fall off a cliff, because we know eventually they have to come in with more liquidity. How long do I figure you have in the service? Well, I've been in for 15 years. And now I have golden handcuffs, kind of. I mean, I like being in the military, but if they give me early retirement, I'd probably take it. So it's been tough. That's all I'll say. Last 2 years. Makes me think. One of the kind of rhetorical questions I asked is, when do you realize, military service is kind of complicated, but when is it that you realize, because it's hard to put people in a basket of like, oh, you're a good guy versus bad guy. I think America does a lot of great things around the world. I've been a part of a lot of great things around the world with a lot of great service members. When do you realize that your mission and you're not the good guy, like in Iraq? When do you realize that the people in charge of you are telling you to do things based off of intel that they're lying about? I don't know when that realization is, but I've had that rhetorical question in my brain a couple times, to be honest with you. Sadly, coal strip owners, these are people in Wyoming, I would imagine, heavily are pushing ESG heavily. Coal strip has another 400 years of coal. Currently has wind and farm north of coal strip. Oh, gotcha. Thanks, All Night Hider. Yeah. I guess it is green over in Ukraine, but it's a if you follow what the West is saying, the Western media, and you believe what they're saying, you think that they're destroying Russia and Russia's going to slowly retreat, and then Ukraine's going to live happily ever after. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And I have a strong suspicion that Ukraine's going to lose this year, right? They're going to have to make concessions at least this year, because, again, it's a war of attrition. Thanks, Laid X. Appreciate it. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in to another live stream. I finally got monetized, apparently. I'm out of detention for saying the wrong thing. So I guess I'm going to get monetized at some point the next couple of days. I have to get approved first, the overlords. But that's kind of cool. But so I'll probably start putting out at least one a day, but maybe two. I'll try. But look for another one early tomorrow. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for your questions. Always love hanging out with you guys on Monday nights. I'll see you guys next Monday with another live stream. Peace.